right. Welcome, everyone. Looks like a small but mighty group today. We're excited to have you. Thanks for joining us. If you don't know already, my name is Brandy. I am a case manager and a licensed clinical social worker here at the Cohen Clinic. If you're not familiar with our program, we are outpatient mental health services for anyone military connected or impacted by the duty of a service member. So we're looking at the service member themselves, a veteran, and any of their family members, whether it's an adult, kids, or their mothers and fathers or aunts or uncles. Just anyone that they call family, we call family. Um, we do lots of different kind of care. We also have our community program that we work alongside, which is Alaska Behavioral Health. We are basically their military programs, and they see an array from inpatient, outpatient, substance abuse, serious mental illness, all different kinds of things that we have through AKBH. And if anyone needs that information, you can always reach out. You have my email from the registration. If not, let me know. If you do have any questions throughout our presentation today, you can drop it right into the chat, and I'm happy to make sure that we can get those answered by our presenter. Today we have a guest presenter. We're really excited for this new, fresh topic to the series. Our guest presenter today is Chaplain McDougall, and I will give him the floor to go ahead and introduce himself and his presentation.
Thanks, Brandy. Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. Thanks for all of you that are here. This is a topic I feel very passionate about, and something that there's a lot of people in the Department of Defense and elsewhere who are asking these questions. What is spirituality and how do we foster it in people? And I think, some of you either are, as clinicians, you're interested in that subject for your clients, or you're interested in it for yourself or a family member, loved one. So it's super relevant, I think. It's also relevant if you think about the time of year, right? So today's the last day of Hanukkah. We're a couple days away from Christmas. Yesterday was the darkest day of the year here in Alaska. So, spirituality is relevant all of the year, but certainly we feel it maybe more now than in other times. So, spirituality and wellness, staying connected to what matters. So we're going to talk more about that. I do want to point out the disclaimer that's at the bottom of the page. Truly, these are my views. Even though I'm an Army chaplain, these don't necessarily represent the Army's views or the Department of Defense views, and they're not necessarily Cohen's views either. It's interesting that we need a disclaimer, but I know that spirituality and religion are difficult topics. And so there are strong feelings, right? Strong feelings on all sides. And so it is important just to be sensitive to, that we all have different views. We all have different takes and different experiences on this subject. So I want to be sensitive throughout. Although I do want to say, I am a Christian chaplain. That is my background. That is my experience. That is my base from which I'm speaking. So while being understanding to all views, that's just who I am. So let's proceed, shall we? Agenda, we'll talk a little bit about me. We'll try to define spirituality, talk about different types. I've got a few metaphors to share with you. We'll talk about low spirituality, if you see that in yourself or in others, and then some treatment strategies. Okay, just a little about me. Brandy said a little bit. I was an infantry officer for 6 years. I deployed to Iraq in 2003. It was actually in Iraq that I heard God's call to become a chaplain. So that's a great story for another day. Went and got a Master's of Divinity in Portland, Oregon. I've been a chaplain now for 16 years, including 4 deployments to Afghanistan. I'm currently working on a Master's of Arts in Clinical Mental Health Counseling, so I'm excited about that. Been in Alaska almost 7 years, and for 2 years, I was the Spiritual Readiness Chaplain for the newly formed 11th Airborne Division. So that's where this topic really came front and center for me, is trying to understand spirituality for myself and then trying to express it to others, right? What is it? How can they connect to it? I've written a couple things. There's a book related to my faith and my military service called Jesus Was an Airborne Ranger, and an article about empathetic leadership as well. So a couple things about me. All right. What is spirituality? Huge question, huge topic, a lot of different opinions. I've got some notes here, so if you'll forgive me looking down a little bit. The first thing is it begins with really basic human questions that all of us have, that we wrestle with at some point in our lives. Often in our youth, we ask these questions, or our adolescence, but some of us don't get to them until a little bit later. So maybe we've heard this idea, is there something bigger than ourselves, right? Something out there, is that a something or a someone? Is it an energy? Is it a force? Is it karma? Like, how does the universe work, right? And then I wrote, is there a metaphysical part of us, right? And you can use other words for that, perhaps transcendent or supernatural or eternal, right? Is there something in us that is beyond just the physical functions of a human body? And then, yeah, kind of the same kind of thing. Is there meaning and purpose beyond the physical? We know the basic human functions we need to survive: eat, sleep, procreate, right? Those basic human functions. But is there something beyond that? And then kind of one that's tied to ethics. What values or behaviors constitute a good life? How do I live a good life? And if the answer to some of those questions are yes, then the question we're going to deal with, which is what spirituality is how do I connect to that something or someone? How do I connect with that inner part of me that is somehow transcendent of the physical? How do I find meaning? How do I find a good life? Right. So that's kind of what we're talking about in the basic view of what is spirituality. And humans of all cultures, all languages, all locations have been trying to create systems for those questions, systems of understanding to those questions. And you can see just a number of them here. Certainly early, we had polytheism. Hinduism is one common example that's still really prevalent around. Animism and ancestor worship we still see in parts of the world. Monotheism, of course, is maybe the one as Western people were most familiar with in the three Abrahamic faiths. Um, Paganism, at least in the military, I can't speak for maybe everyone's experiences here, but certainly paganism in the military has grown significantly. With a long time, it was Wicca was the topic in the late 90s, early 2000s, and Norse paganism is kind of been on the rise as well. There are religions, sometimes we call them religions, but these are really more closely to philosophies. If you think about Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and Stoicism, not really worship of deities, but really more of a system of how do I live a good life. And then another group that is growing, some people say the largest growing religious group, although, we could put quotes around religion, is this idea of secular spirituality. So SBNR is spiritual but not religious. So maybe you've heard that term. People have used that term before to describe themselves, or you've used it to describe yourself. And then the media kind of uses this term of the nuns, right? The people, not N-U-N, that's Catholic, that's a different thing, but N-O-N-E, the nuns, people that just don't identify with any particular group. So just recently, in terms of the secular spirituality that we see there at the bottom, people, because all of those groups above, there's sort of already a developed system, and you decide, hey, I want to join this system. I want to believe and practice according to this system of belief. With secular spirituality, it's really kind of an eclectic because people are able to design it for themselves, right? So what do I want spirituality to look like for me? So rather than join a system, it's a little more of maybe a little more freedom, right, to design a system for yourself. So what does that look like? It can look like borrowing from any of the above list, right? So maybe someone who was doing secular spirituality would say, well, I like yoga. I just don't want to be a part of that faith. Or I like meditation, but I don't want to be a part of that faith. Or so, I like some of these aspects of religion. I just don't want to subscribe to all of it. Or it could be adding things that really aren't in any of those systems, like hiking and kayaking and journaling, right? So some of these things that aren't really part of religious systems, but can be part of secular spirituality. All right, we'll keep moving. I hope we're doing okay so far. It's hard not to see you guys, but hopefully we're doing okay. As I said, kind of in the introduction, the Department of Defense is working on this too. And I know there's other organizations trying to understand spirituality outside of religion or spirituality inclusive of religion. So here's a couple Department of Defense definitions. The Army, spirituality is a sense of connection that gives meaning and purpose to a person's life. I like that definition. It's kind of short and brief. The Air Force says spirituality is the means to find ultimate meaning and purpose in life. So similar, but maybe a little less clear. Just it gives you the means. So I think the Air Force is giving you space to define what you think those means are. And then a little different twist, but the word spiritual or the idea of spiritual fitness, I like this from the Marine Corps. Spiritual fitness is inner strength from higher purposes. Leave it to the Marine Corps to use the fewest number of words. But I like this idea, inner strength from some sort of higher purpose or meaning. So a couple things that are out there, and I have some references there if you want to look at those on your own. But again, the DoD is not alone in trying to wrestle with what is this and how do we understand it. There's a number we had in the Army. We had our chief of chaplains bring a number of presenters. We had one from Columbia and one from Baylor that came and spoke to us on some of the programs they're doing with college students about spirituality and a life worth living and some of those other things. So I can give you some of those resources as well if you're interested. So this is my working definition. This is my favorite synonym for spirituality is connectedness, right? Connectedness. We are trying to connect to something or someone. And we feel that like when you have a spiritual moment, however you define that, when you have a spiritual moment, you are feeling connected. That's what you're feeling. So whether that's in worship, whether that's alone in your house, whether that's out in nature, that connectedness is what we're feeling, and it's deeper. It's deeper than the physical, right? But I always ask my soldiers, right? And I'll ask you. So if it's about connectedness, then tell me to what or to whom are you connecting, right? What is your connection? And then how do you do it? How do you connect to this thing? And when do you connect with it? How often do you connect with it? That's sort of the next questions, right? People like to say, I'm spiritual. I said, that's great. I love that you say you're spiritual. You're also physical. Like if you said, physical fitness is important to me, and I asked you, well, what do you do for physical fitness? And they're like, oh, nothing really. I would have to question like how is spiritual fitness really important to you? And the same is true with spiritual fitness, right? If someone says, hey, I'm very spiritual, great. What do you do? What do you connect to, and how often do you do it? Historically, people line up with systems of belief based on geography and family, but now more and more people are kind of defining it on their own and having their own selective ideas. So why spirituality? Why now? Why is this the topic du jour for the last 10, 15 years? I think we are more digitally connected than ever, but we're more and more spiritually disconnected from things that used to be sources of meaning and purpose. I'll put it that way. So in previous generations, I think if you were having a difficult time, probably some of the two things you'd run to faith and family. And I'd probably add friends there too. But I think increasingly people feel like I don't have a faith tradition. I don't have maybe strong family roots or strong family connections. I have friends, but not close friends. So it's that loss of community that we're looking for, some connection. And just loss of purpose, meaning, and identity, right? So who am I outside of my 9 to 5 job, and even maybe some family relationships? Like who am I in the bigger picture? I'm sure most of you here are familiar with the painting that I have there. This is from the Sistine Chapel. It's the creation of Adam is what it is. Again, whether you subscribe to the Bible, the Jewish scriptures or not. But I love this idea of spirituality is this idea of to touch the divine. And all of us want to somehow touch the divine. First of all, we have to define what the divine is. So what does that mean? What am I connecting to? And how am I connecting to it? That's really this idea of connectedness, to touch the divine. So we'll talk more about what are some of those means and methods for connecting. All right. So types of spirituality. We often talk about spirituality within religion, and then spirituality outside of religion is one way to look at it. So what does religion provide? You can see some of the items down there. Religion provides doctrine, right? What do we believe? It provides practices. What do we do? How do we express this doctrine either collectively in a group or individually? And it often provides a system of ethics, right? What is the good life? What is right and wrong? What behaviors should we engage in? How should we treat our neighbor and our family? So this is often what we see in religion. In spirituality and non-religious spirituality, we talk about meaning and connection and values. We'll talk about these things more a little bit later. Sometimes you could look at this if you wanted to categorize these two. It's kind of the head and the heart. One religion sometimes is a lot of information, right? It's knowledge, and the other is the heart. It's the experience, right? It's experiencing something. I felt something I can't quite put words to, but I felt a connection and it was meaningful, right? an analogy as I was working on these slides, analogy came to me is it's sort of the difference between an orchard and a forest, right? Orchards are great. They're planned, they're plotted, they're orderly, they're linear, they produce fruit, they're productive. But forests are not. They're wild, they're untamed. They're both beautiful. They're just very different. And what I want to show in the next slide is that these aren't necessarily mutually exclusive as I've drawn them. I do think there's an intersection. I do think there are people in religion who experience spirituality, right? They experience spirituality in religion. And you see some of those words in red, right? This idea of worship is an experience. It's an experience based on beliefs, joy and peace. Those are internal experiences, right? And certainly within religion, you can experience community as well. Um, I do want to say, just as a means of understanding, and I don't know who all is here. I do understand that in the name of religion, there's been a lot of hurt in our world, in our history, in your personal lives, in people you know and care about. I hear that a lot as a chaplain. Most often, the way people introduce themselves, they'll come in, sit down, and say, "Now, sir, I'm not religious, but can we talk?" And invariably, many times I will find that there was religion at some point, but there was a hurt, there was a wound, something happened. So I just want to be sensitive to that as well, in talking about religion and spirituality and showing that they're not necessarily exclusive. So this is what I'm depicting as both head and heart, right? This is both head and heart. This is both knowledge and feeling and experience. All right, shall we? All right, so looking at religious spirituality, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but if you have a client or yourself who's a person of a religious faith, religious tradition, there are usually three things that come with every religion, and they're listed there. So there's a set of beliefs, like what do we believe about those questions? Remember those four questions we started with at the beginning? What do we believe about the universe? What do we believe about the soul or the spirit within? Right? What do we believe about that? So that's theology and values, and those come with, you know, that those come with a faith, right? There's also a set of practices. So what do we do? So we have these ideas, these beliefs. You know, what do we do with them? What are our experiences? How often do we gather? What day of the week do we gather? What do we do when we gather? What do we do when we're apart? Are there practices we're supposed to practice on our own individually, whether that's fasting or scriptures or meditation or prayer? Um, and there's certainly, yeah, there'll be a set of rules as well. What does right living look like? What are things we do and what are things we don't do? And then the last thing I think that every religious community provides is a faith community, right? There's a group. So you have a set of beliefs, you have a set of practices, but you also have a group in which you can do that. Group who shares your values, shares your views, that you can join with, that you can lean into, that hopefully you can be safe and struggle with too when you're having a difficult time. Let me glance down here, see if I've got anything to add. Yeah. Community, church, parish, mosque, synagogue, temple. Um, yeah, I'll say this, you know, there's a lot about um, mindfulness right today, in our age, and I think religious spirituality can be very mindful. There can be a sense of very present moment. There's a taste, there's a smell, there's a color, there's a sight, there's sound, there's music. For some of us maybe that grew up in religious traditions, you know, there's a song that will come on and it takes you back. It takes me back to I'm 10 or 12 in my childhood church. Or I know my wife, she grew up in an Episcopalian tradition. She'll say the smells of incense or the taste of communion, right? Will just take her back. So it can be very present moment as well. All right, let's look at non-religious spirituality. Okay. Secular spirituality, as I said earlier, not as structured. You're not getting like these three things come with every religious tradition. In secular spirituality, it's kind of design on your own, right? It's kind of a la carte. And there's a couple categories. These are by no means exclusive, but these are a couple categories that secular spirituality can be drawn from. So I look at categories of mindfulness. We just talked about that a moment ago. So journaling, certainly yoga, breathing techniques, all can be part of that mindful spirituality, just being in the present moment, being very aware, doing body scans, right? All those things. Nature, I meet a lot of people, especially, if you come to Alaska and you stay in Alaska, you're probably connected to nature somehow. And nature provides this stillness, provides a sense of awe and wonder. It can provide solitude. We'll talk more about that in a minute too. And then the other part of spirituality, we talked about virtues in religion. They're sort of handed to you as a group. In secular spirituality, it's really you're designing, hey, what virtues and values are important to me? There's a couple that just seem to show up a lot. 2 weeks ago, if you missed it, Mary Beth gave a talk on forgiveness. And so that is a spiritual topic. It is, it's more than just the physical. It's something deeper. Gratitude is often one that shows up in mindfulness and other behavioral health type things. And then just respect for others, respect for yourself, respect for nature or the community, right? We see these things appearing as well. So again, not by any means exclusive list, but just a place to start for some secular spirituality. All right. I do want to take a moment just to talk about nature for a little bit. One, this is kind of an area that I'm really interested in and learning a lot about. What is nature-based spirituality? But I just feel like, especially where we live, it's so real. I was just really wrestling with the question of why do people of all faith traditions and no faith traditions, why do they feel this connection to nature? What is that really about? And how does that benefit them? That's really kind of the questions I've been wrestling with lately. Maybe some of you have answers or articles or places I could go to. I would welcome any of that. But some of my thoughts, here's some of my thoughts, is awe and humility. Awe and humility. I think that as humans, we are meant to feel that sense of wonder and awe. I think that our ancestors, generations back, felt that on a regular basis because the world was huge. Oceans are huge. The universe is huge. The sky is huge, and we just felt a sense of feeling small. And I think that's good for us. I think that, like I said, that was common for them. I think it's helpful for us, and so we feel that sense of. I will tell you, when I'm out in the mountains, I feel small, but so do my problems. So do the things that seemed huge when I was at my house, 2 hours, 3 hours earlier. Out there on the trail, they don't feel big anymore. So I get small, but also my problems get small. And I think awe usually has to do with three things. That's what I wrote there in parentheses. So when we see something of great size, great power, or great beauty, we have a sense of going, wow. Wow. And those things can occur in cities, but they just don't seem to occur that much often. I can see alpenglow out my window right now. I can see that low sunlight hitting the roof across the street. It's just that sense of wow, of wonder and awe and beauty. The next thing, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but just this idea of we want to touch the divine. We want to experience something transcendent that is again, beauty, wonder, awe. And so I think nature gives us that sense of being on top of a mountain and just feeling the breeze, seeing the sights, maybe even tasting, the aroma that is there, smelling and tasting. Yeah, this has been something I've been wrestling with too. This idea of permanence and change. We relative to nature, we don't live that long. And so we're here for a moment and we're gone. But there's a sense of when we're out in nature, we're experiencing things that have been here for millennia and will be here for much longer than us, right? There's a permanence on that mountain or that lake. But there's also seasons of change. So like us, the mountains go through change, lakes go through change, trees go through change. And so there's a sense of continuity within change. And I think that we connect to that as well, because that's our human experience. Groundedness, I'm still learning about this a bit, but there's a physical reality of groundedness, of touching soil and being connected to the earth. But there's also a very emotional, right? It's a solid place to stand in a world that's constantly changing, constantly evolving, the 24-hour news cycle. There's something solid in the ground as you look at those images there next to me. Mindfulness, we talked about present moment and just the stillness. Our world is so busy and so loud all the time. When do we get a moment of stillness? This reminds me, there was a study the University of Michigan did a few years ago where they took two groups of people. They gave them a memory test. And then one group, they took them out into Ann Arbor, the city of Ann Arbor there in Michigan, and they walked them around for a length of time. And the other group, they took them through an arboretum. So they took him into nature there and they walked him around for a while and they brought him back and they gave him the same memory test. And as you might guess, the people who spent time in nature performed better than the people who walked around in the city. And they thought, well, maybe it's the sounds, maybe it was just too noisy. So they did the experiment again. They showed one group just pictures of cities, and one group they showed pictures of trees, and they saw the same results. So there's something about our cities that, with all its busyness and noise and energy, that drains us literally of our memory resources and other resources, whereas nature gives us those resources back. So just some things to think about nature. A couple metaphors. I've got a few metaphors for you. And you see these in some of these faiths. I'm going to glance down at my notes. So one spiritual metaphor is this idea of pilgrimage, a journey that we're heading somewhere. This life is about heading towards something, and we want to get there. And there's a journey, there's a struggle, there's a difficulty. I know that in my own tradition in Christianity, this is kind of the way we sometimes think. You hear terms in Christianity like "this world is not my home." I'm headed for another place. We're on a journey. There was maybe the famous book in Christianity, 1678 book called Pilgrim's Progress, and it was all about a man's life as he journeyed toward eternity, right, toward heaven. The second one, struggle, wrestle, effort, right? This idea, hey, faith is a struggle. It's constantly, it's wrestling with these ideas, wrestling with God. That's certainly present in both faith traditions and secular spirituality as well. Judaism, the word Israel means wrestles with God. So Israel as a nation and as a person wrestles with God. Islam, we have the idea jihad, if you're familiar with that term. The lesser jihad is actually a struggle with other people. The greater jihad is the struggle within, the struggle with your own vices and your own desires and your own sinful nature. So there's definitely that idea. And then this last one, the process or path or the way, right? Maybe the first one come to mind for some of you, it is for me, is Buddhism. Buddhism has the Four Noble Truths, but they also have the Eightfold Path to Enlightenment. So this idea that if you follow this process, if you follow this path, this way will lead you to enlightenment. Interestingly, in the beginnings of Christianity, in the book of Acts, as recorded in the Bible, some of the earliest terms used for Christianity was called the way. So there's a connection there as well. So those are some spiritual metaphors you may see or could use. This is one where I would love to have a conversation with each of you. That's not possible in this way. But when I think about, for many of my soldiers, they're used to physical fitness, right? And maybe they're less familiar talking about spiritual fitness. And so I use this as sort of a comparison, like how are these similar and how are these different? Again, would love to get your thoughts, but that's not necessarily realistic here. So be thinking about how are these similar and different. I've got a couple notes here just to share with you. The first thing I would say for both is you choose your own program, right? So if someone says they're into physical fitness, I want to ask, well, what does that mean? What do you do? And you can see there, you've got some CrossFitters, you've got a runner, maybe somebody does triathlon, maybe they do traditional weightlifting. Or you make your own, right? You make your own plan, but you're doing something. Swimmers, right? So that's something in a way that's similar. You come up with your own plan, or you join a plan that's already works for a lot of people, right? That's kind of the same deal if you think about religion and secular spirituality. Another thing in both of them that they're similar is you need both variety and you need consistency. So you can't necessarily maybe do the same thing every day. If you run 5 miles every day, eventually you're either going to get bored or you're going to get injured. And I think the spiritual fitness is same there too. What is a routine that has enough variety, but also that you consistently do it? If you say, well, I'm going to run 5 miles once a week, that's going to benefit you, but not nearly if you have something in those other intervening 6 days. So variety and consistency. I think the other thing that is so similar with both of these is who do you want to be? I actually, full disclosure, I am a CrossFit coach here in Eagle River. And a lot of times that's what I'm asking athletes is who do you want to be? Why are you here? What are your goals? Everybody wants to be a better version of themselves. Well, what does that look like? And I think spiritual fitness is the same way. What are some areas of your spiritual life, your inner life that you're wanting to improve, right? And how can we work on that? The biggest difference I would see is it's hard to measure spiritual fitness. We can put numbers to physical fitness. In fact, the military does this all the time. We have PT tests. We measure how well you're doing compared to others or how well you're doing compared to your test last year. Spiritual fitness is much harder, much more subjective. How do we measure how we're doing? Are we on the right track to meet some of our spiritual goals? All right, that's all I have there. Again, I wish I could get your input, but things to think about. So here I just want to talk about, what is a symptom of someone who has a low spirituality, either yourself or someone you know or someone you work with. I love the metaphor. Again, another spiritual metaphor is drawing water from a well, right? So we reach down, we expect that bucket to fill with life-giving water, and we pull it back up. The difficulty with a well is it's hard to know when it's low. You can pay attention to how many rungs of rope or how long it takes the bucket to get down there. But if you're just looking down, it's hard to know when a bucket, or sorry, when a bucket, when the well is drawing low. And I think that is a strong analogy for spirituality. You keep drawing water, you keep drawing water, you keep drawing water, and then one day there just isn't any. And maybe some of you can relate to that, either in your own life or the lives of people you know and care about. You just reach down and there's nothing left to draw. And so I think that's really something we can relate to. And here's some of those maybe symptoms, right? Irritability and frustration, right? Man, I didn't used to be this easily ticked off. I didn't used to be this much of a hairline trigger, but now I just find I'm getting frustrated with things all the time. Um, Anger and fear, right? We see that. Just angry again over the smallest things, or just so much uncertainty in life that fear kind of dominates their way of thinking. Then it leads to cynicism. The whole world is flawed, everybody's flawed, and so I isolate myself, right? I isolate myself from the world. And I think another sign is blame and hatred. Well, there's a reason why I'm unhappy, and it's not my fault. It's someone else's fault, and they deserve whatever's coming to them, right? So there's that sort of, those are all symptoms, I would say, of low spirituality. And then I know this is from my Christian tradition, and whatever your views or not, I think this is a great list. The fruit of the Spirit, as recorded in the book of Galatians, I use this myself. How am I doing on these? Is my life characterized by love and joy and peace and patience? What does my family think about those characteristics? What would they say about how well I'm doing that? What would my friends say, right? Am I faithful? Do you see that down there? Am I keeping my promises? Do I do what I say I'm going to do? Gentleness. That is hard for me sometimes. My tone is not always gentle, and I realize it after I say what I said. And then I think self-control too, and we can talk about addiction and addictive behaviors. Am I at a place, we talk about sometimes we are more susceptible when we're tired, when we're hungry, when we're exhausted, right? Do I have the self-control to make decisions about what I'm doing or not doing? Let's see if I got, yeah. So again, it's difficult to measure these things, but there will be signs, just kind of like drawing water from a well. It's difficult to know when you're drawing low or drawing empty, but there will be signs if we're keeping an eye out for them. All right, I think I've got a little more slide. Oh, two more slides on treatment strategies. So just a couple things if you or someone you're working with is feeling low spiritually. Here's some ideas. So first, reconnect to past strategies. What worked for them in the past? So I have here return to faith practices, maybe that were important to them before, or outdoor activities that they used to do that used to be life-giving, life-sustaining, or some mindfulness exercises. Man, I used to journal and I just haven't done it in a long time and I miss it, right? How can we get back to it? And I put in parentheses there because I don't want it just to be about things we do. Sometimes it's not about what we do. Think about locations, just going back to a place that has meaning for you, right? Man, I used to come here with my grandparents or my parents and just full of meaning, right? And then I would tell you, think about all the senses. Sometimes as Western Americans, we can just think about very academic and heady. Think about tastes and smells and feels, right? All of those things reconnecting to those past strategies. Or you develop new strategies. Hey, I'm really not going to go back to those things that in my past for a variety of reasons, but I'd like to try something new. So you can see poetry or hiking or prayer or journaling or a new group of people, a new community. Or you add to what's working. Hey, I like what I'm doing. I just maybe need a little more of it. So increase the frequency or duration. Maybe it needs a reminder on your phone or a block in your day schedule calendar to create that lasting habit. Man, I do this, but I don't do it enough. So I want to get into more of it. And then I say, look to other cultures. I know we're concerned sometimes as a cultural appropriation, but man, there's some beautiful words in other cultures and languages I think we could borrow. I recently learned about Shinrin-yoku, which is forest bathing. And in Japan, when people are depressed, when they're feeling low, they're being prescribed time in the woods. And there are these courses that are mapped out in outside of cities, and people are prescribed to go spend an hour walking through the forest. So that word means forest bathing. I found this word in German, Waldeinsamkeit. I think I said that well enough. Is solitude in the forest. I found another definition I want to share with you too. Here it is. Waldeinsamkeit is also the quiet joy of being alone in nature. I'll just say that again. The quiet joy of being alone in nature, right? So there's a beautiful word, an idea that we don't have in English. And then I think this one's a little more popular. Hygge is that coziness, contentment, and connection. We see that a lot more. I think the spas and things talk about this idea from Danish and Norwegian culture. So there's some ideas as well. I'm sure there are others. Maybe you guys know them. You could share with them in the chat. I've got one more. This one's kind of a more my list. These are some things I would encourage someone I was dealing with that was low in spirituality. First, I would say disconnect from media as much as you can, right? As much as it's within your power to do, disconnect. I thought about the other day, we have the term that is my news feed, right? You know that noun, like news feed or my media feed. I thought about, well, that word feed, what are we eating? What are we consuming? We use that word about consuming media. You literally are taking it in. Is what we're taking in good? So I think media tends to feed sadness, anger, and fear. That's what it tends to do. And so it's no surprise that we're feeling sadness, anger, and fear if we're consuming that kind of food. Some connecting though, connect to community. Maybe that's a faith community. Maybe that's neighbors on your block. Maybe there's a place you could volunteer. You could play a sport. Like I mentioned, I do CrossFit, or maybe there's just some activity that would be fun. Maybe just some skiers, a group of skiers, a group of cyclists, right? Things that you could just play and enjoy together. When I was in at Fort Lewis, Washington, there was a group that would run. It was Wear Blue, Run to Remember, and it was a veterans group that would meet every Saturday, and we'd run 3 miles and remember somebody that we lost, right, in the service. So again, that community, that purpose of joining together. I tell people to connect to music or literature, right? The idea of creating a spiritual playlist, some songs that if you're in a funk, these are what pull you out. And again, those could be some of those hymns from your religious tradition. They could be just something the positive message that just lifts you up whenever you're feeling low. Reading list, again, poetry or scripture or anything that could help you kind of lift you a little bit. We've talked about it already, connecting to nature, all kinds of nature, all the senses involved. We see that in religious traditions as well, right? This idea of connecting to God through nature, or we connect to nature itself, or we connect to something permanent and lasting. And then this last one, connect through touch. We know how well the central nervous system and the heart and the blood pressure go down with touch. I read a while ago about 5 minutes with a pet, just stroking a pet, a cat or a dog, can bring your blood pressure down, your heart rate down, your cortisol levels down in such a dramatic fashion that if we could make it a pill, they couldn't keep it on the shelves. And so just a reminder I know that my wife, when she sees me a bit in a funk, she says, "Hey, just go sit on the couch with your dog." And she's right. It makes a big difference. So those are a couple lists of strategies for me. That's really all I have, Brandy. There's kind of a summary, a reminder that spirituality is about connection. So I ask people, who and how are you connected? What are you doing? Are you borrowing from religious traditions? Do you subscribe to a religious tradition, or are you kind of creating one of your own? We talked about some metaphors, what it feels like to be low spirituality, and some treatment strategies. So that's spirituality and wellness.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Awesome information. Did anyone have any questions they wanted to drop in the chat? I could probably figure out how to unmute you or give you access to speak if you feel so inclined. So please let me know what works for you if you have any questions. Otherwise, that's a wrap for the day, and we hope to see you next week. Thanks, Kelly. She said, "What an excellent presentation. It was so informative and helpful."
Good, good. I'm glad.
Molly says, "Thank you. Great information." David said, "Thank you." Thank you all for being here. Kelly also said she loves the slides. Best wishes on your next degree.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, for everyone, again, I'm open to questions, but for everyone to enjoy this holiday season, maybe some rest and recovery yourself, and maybe some of these things can be helpful as you think about the new year as well. I know we have one more lunch and learn before the new year, but think about what are some goals you might have in this area as well.
I love that. That's such a good kind of thinking of changing from those normal, these are my goals for the year. This is what I want to do. This is how I can, better my health or my house and, some of these material things a lot of times, I find in my goals for the year. So this is kind of just a nice little pause for a moment, rethink it and what's actually truly important and how to get kind of where I want to be.
Hmm.
It's kind of where you start. Kelly says, I love the question, how are you connected?
Hmm. Good.
Oh, I missed a comment too. David said, this is good for a reboot.
Hmm. Yeah, we do, as you said, Brandy, we get sucked into kind of that American rat race of whatever temporal things we want to change, and we sometimes miss sight of these. And these are the ones that are really more significant, more lasting. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, if no one else has any questions, we can go ahead and end the session. And a really great job today. Thank you for being here and for sharing with us all of this amazing information. If anyone has any questions, wants to reach out, you have my email, and I can also field any questions to Chaplain McDougall. And we're happy to be here to help and support. Thank you all. Have a great day. There we go. All right. Great job. It was really awesome. It looks like everybody's gone. So,
Yeah.
um, awesome job. It was really, really great.
Thank
I
you.
think a lot of people are going to